Hello, this is Ingrid. Welcome to part of Week 12's activities for EDPC 5003. This presentation is just a quick overview of assessment online and ways this can be done. There are many ways to use the internet to conduct assessment, so this presentation will just review a few considerations for assessment online and give a few examples of how we can do this. Hope you enjoyed the video. Okay. Just to review how this presentation is going to meet this week's learning objectives, we're going to cover the following learning objectives. So first we're going to examine the role of assessment in learning and considerations for assessment online, and then we're going to identify ways assessment can be conducted online. So before we go into using online methods of assessment, I just quickly want to review what is assessment and why it's important. The first point to remember is that assessment drives learning. Several studies show that students will only learn what they are assessed on. Therefore, as educators, we need to ensure that our objectives, content, and assessment methods are aligned. Assessment requires attention to both outcomes and equally the experiences that lead to those outcomes. It is driven by learning outcomes and is an essential part of the design and structure of the learning environment. Second, assessment reflects an understanding of learning. Therefore, it works best when it is ongoing and not periodic. As educators, we should promote assessment as a part of learning. Finally, remember that there are two types of assessment. Summative, when the assessment is conducted to determine the student's status with respect to the educational objectives. And formative, when the assessment is used as information to adapt teaching and learning to meet the student's needs. These are just the basic principles of assessment that need to be considered when creating assessment items for your learners, whether it be online or not. Okay, so now we move into assessment online. The question is not can we assess online, it's more how can we assess online. The attraction to using online methods for assessment is that it allows learners to complete their assignments at any time and any place, allowing for flexibility and accommodation to learner needs. Traditional assessment methods have been delivered in an online format, such as your MCQs and short answer questions. However, online assessment also has the potential to facilitate deeper learning compared to traditional methods. Educators are able to be more creative with different online assessment tools, such as discussion boards, where every learner is able to contribute to the questions, and therefore facilitate more meaningful learning for each participant. If you do decide to assess your learners using online methods, there are a few considerations to think about for when making this decision. First, is the program easy for students to navigate and use independently? Do you need to provide instructions on how to navigate through the program? Are there system costs? Sometimes there's system costs per student, or there's a class license that needs to be obtained. You need to think about the type of technology that's required to use for the system, such as a PC, a laptop, or an iPad. And finally, you need to ensure that there's still confidentiality for students, particularly if results are going to be posted online. These are just a few points to consider when implementing online assessment methods. Raphael et al. 2003 also illustrate that there are a few barriers to online assessment that need to be considered by educators. These include affective barriers, such as computer anxiety and uncertainty when using a computer, particularly when introducing high-stakes exams. There are also instructors and students who are not knowledgeable or comfortable using computers or working within a web-based environment. There are also security barriers, such as concerns for privacy and security issues in a central and open system. And instructors also feel that there's a reduction in their control. Some students might study alone, whilst others might collaborate with fellow students. Finally, there are also technical barriers, including technology failures such as computer or internet crashes, insufficient hardware available, and instructors also feel that generating assessment items can be time-consuming. Though there are barriers to online assessment, there are still benefits to using this format. And therefore, these barriers need to be taken into consideration when designing and using online assessment tools, but not to deter educators from using online assessment methods. Alright, so now that we've introduced online assessment methods, and and its considerations, the next part of this presentation will just introduce you to a few ways one can assess online. These are not the only methods, just a few good examples. Okay, so the first example of how one can assess online is through asynchronous discussion. Van der Wel et al. 2007 found that there are 5 key factors that influenced student learning and assessment in asynchronous discussion online. The first factor was that it was important to have a structure to the discussion. The better the structure, the more successful the learning experience and the assessment. Students found that threaded discussions created more in-depth responses in learning and were much more favored by students. Non-threaded discussions tended to be more redundant and repetitious, not allowing for deeper learning. It was also essential to have assessment criteria for the asynchronous discussion boards. It not only helped guide participants in the discussion, but it allowed them to know what was expected of them. The second factor was the learning community. It was important for instructors to build a sense of community within the online environment, where students felt comfortable to contribute to their opinions. It is important for both students and instructors to participate through the discussion. And students also found that more learning took place when there was a variety of viewpoints. The third factor was self-regulatory cognition and activities. Asynchronous discussion encouraged reflection, metacognition, and self-regulation, and were essential to the learning and assessment experience online. Students were able to look back on their postings and reflect on their answers. As responses were posted, this forced students to rethink and assess their comments before posting, facilitating deeper learning. The fourth factor was learner autonomy. The online nature of the discussion made students become more responsible for their learning. They were able to schedule their own learning and contributions to the discussion. And finally, student writing skills was a big factor in learning for asynchronous discussion. It was found that the writing skills and understanding of the discussion tasks influenced the student discussions, where inexperienced students struggled more as they had more difficulty articulating their learning. This demonstrates the importance of writing skills in student engagement of learning in asynchronous discussion. There are also a variety of online programs tailored for student assessment. An example of this is the QSIA program, which stands for Questions, Sharing, and Interactive Assignments. This is a web-based learning environment developed by Raphael et al. In 2004, based on the idea of creating a community of learners who seek guidance and recommendations on relevant resources and sharing of knowledge. It is essentially a data system that collects, retrieves, and uses knowledge items within a knowledge discipline. These resources are then shared across disciplines and beyond boundaries. The QSIA program has both teacher and student capabilities, where teachers can use assessment methods online and students can take the assessment tool. QSIA is based on 4 main concepts. First, knowledge generation, where knowledge items and resources are made. Second is knowledge sharing, where resources are shared amongst participants. The third is knowledge assessment, where activities can be created for learners. Assessment activities can be both formal and informal, and specific feedback can be given to learners. So if you see the picture on the screen, you will see an assessment activity from the site. And then the final main concept of the QSIA is knowledge management, where users can store and manage content and resources for learning. So this brings us to the end of the presentation. Just to review what we've covered quickly. First, remember that assessment drives learning, and educators should develop assessment tools that align with overall learning objectives, both traditional assessment and online assessment. Second, online assessment is an innovative and creative way to not only deliver traditional assessment methods, but also other methods that are outside of the traditional classroom. Finally, we've also looked at a few ways that online assessment can be delivered, such as asynchronous discussion and the QSIA program. For those of you interested in seeing a few other examples of ways that assessment can be delivered online, you'll see 2 links that have some examples of different assessment platforms. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but another avenue to get the creative juices going for online assessment. The link is also posted on the web page for this week's online activities. This is the reference list used to develop this presentation. I really hope you enjoyed the presentation. I've started to think a bit about how you might be able to use online assessment in your current educational practice. If you want to go back to this week's web page, it'll give you the next activity to do for this week. Thanks!